In this section, we will look at how Prime Minister Justin Trudeau pushed for increased cooperation on global and economic security to guard against geopolitical instability and the threat of climate change at the G7 summit in Japan. Trudeau arrived in Hiroshima, Japan, on May 18, 2023, for the annual meeting of the leaders of the world's 7 most advanced economies: Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, and Japan. The summit was held amid heightened tensions with China and Russia over human rights, trade, and regional conflicts. One of Trudeau's main objectives was to seek the G7 members' support for Ukraine, which has been facing a renewed Russian military buildup along its border. Canada has been a staunch ally of Ukraine since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and backed separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine. Trudeau urged the G7 leaders to stand united against Russia's aggression and to provide more assistance to Ukraine's defense and reform efforts. Another priority for Trudeau was to address the global climate crisis and to promote a green recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. He emphasized the need for the G7 countries to cut their greenhouse gas emissions and to invest in clean energy and technology. He also highlighted Canada's commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and to phase out coal-fired electricity by 2030. Trudeau also advocated for a more resilient and inclusive global economy that can withstand future shocks and benefit all people. He called for stronger cooperation on trade, taxation, digitalization, and innovation among the G7 countries and their partners. He also stressed the importance of ensuring fair and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines and treatments around the world. By pushing for increased cooperation on global and economic security, Trudeau aimed to demonstrate Canada's leadership and values on the world stage. He also sought to strengthen Canada's alliances with its traditional Western partners as well as its emerging partners in Asia, such as South Korea and Japan. He hoped that by working together, the G7 countries could tackle the common challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. In this section, we will look at how Prime Minister Justin Trudeau addressed the ongoing war in Ukraine and the need for support from G7 countries. As you may know, Ukraine has been under attack by Russia since February 2023, when Moscow launched a full-scale invasion of its neighbor. The war has caused thousands of deaths, millions of displaced people, and a humanitarian crisis. It has also triggered a global economic shock, as Russia's oil exports have been disrupted and energy prices have soared. Trudeau arrived in Hiroshima for the G7 summit amid geopolitical tensions with China and Russia. He was joined by other leaders of the world's top democratic economies, who were under intense pressure to do more for Ukraine and to stay united against authoritarian threats. Trudeau said he was determined to stand up to Putin and to support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. At the summit, Trudeau announced a $200 million loan to Ukraine through the International Monetary Fund, as part of Canada's $1.6 billion commitment to help Kyiv meet its urgent liquidity needs. He also outlined new sanctions against Russia, targeting state-sponsored disinformation and propaganda. He said more sanctions were coming if Putin continued to act with impunity and cause horrific damage and loss of life in Ukraine and around the world. Trudeau also met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was invited to join the G7 summit as a guest. They discussed the security situation on the ground, the humanitarian needs of the Ukrainian people, and the prospects for a diplomatic solution. Trudeau reaffirmed Canada's unwavering support for Ukraine's democracy and reform efforts. He also praised Zelensky for his courage and resilience in the face of Russian aggression. The G7 leaders issued a joint statement condemning Russia's missile strike on a shopping mall in Kremenchuk, which killed 18 civilians and wounded dozens more. They called it a war crime and a blatant violation of international law. They demanded that Russia stop its attacks on civilian targets, respect the ceasefire agreement, withdraw its troops from Ukrainian territory, and engage in meaningful dialogue with Kyiv. The G7 leaders also vowed to reduce Russia's energy leverage and to diversify their own sources of supply. They agreed to work together on developing a new energy strategy that would enhance their resilience and security, while also addressing the challenge of climate change. They pledged to support green energy initiatives and to phase out coal-fired power plants. Trudeau said the G7 summit was an opportunity to demonstrate solidarity and leadership in a time of crisis. He said he was proud of Canada's role in defending democracy and human rights around the world. He said he hoped that the G7's actions would send a clear message to Putin that his behavior was unacceptable and that he would face serious consequences if he did not change course.